Hi everyone, my name's Jasmine. I'm from Carcanet Press, for those of you that don't know me. It's just gone 7, so I think we'll get going with our reading. Obviously we're here to launch James Womack's new collection, which I have here, which is very exciting, Homunculus. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate your support, especially in this year of all years. Thank you from everyone at Carcanet. I'm just going to run over some things that are going to happen before I hand over. So tonight James is here. He's going to read some poems to us. He's going to be joined by Richard Scott, who you may also know. He's also a brilliant poet. His collection Soho is out with Faber. So if you don't know his poetry, do check that out and get a copy of that. So what's going to happen tonight is this event's going to last about 1 hour. Excuse me. About 1 hour, I'll disappear in a second and Richard will give a proper introduction to James and James's new book. And then James is going to come and read for us. Now, while James is reading, I'm going to be sharing the text on the screen. And I just want you to all know that you're in control of your own screen, what you can see. So if you want to see James's face bigger, you can probably double click on his face, or you can kind of drag the corners of the box out, because he will go really small when I first put the text on screen. So if you want to reconfigure it, then you can do that by just dragging some things around. After James is reading, then Richard's going to come back. They're going to have a bit of discussion about the book. And then at that point, we really would like to open this conversation out to you guys. We want to get some questions from you that maybe Richard can put to James. So if you just have a little look around your screen now, there's a couple of things I want you to find. There's a chat function. Say hello to us. We can see each other, but we can't see you. So it would just be cool to hear from you, say hello, let us know what you think of the poems as the reading's going on, etc. And the other thing I want you to find is the Q&A box. You might need to click on more or something else, but for later on, after Richard and James have had a little chat, it would be great if you could sort of put some questions in that box for James so that we can include you in the conversation. The last thing to let you all know is, obviously you've paid your £2 to be here, so thank you for that. You will get a discount code to buy a copy of the book from the Carcanet website. I'll put it in the chat now. I know this is all happening very fast, so don't worry. I'll put it in the chat again later, and you'll also get an email with this tomorrow. So don't worry about that for now at all. I think that's everything from me, so I'm going to invite Richard to join me, and we'll get going.
Hi, thank you so much, Jasmine. That's great. It's so exciting to be here. Yeah, so James, are you going to keep your video off, or I don't know? Yeah, I guess you were going to stay like a mysterious presence right this second. So it's lovely to be here. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about James, and then we're going to have a reading from James. So I'm so happy to be here. James Womack is a poet, translator, editor, and lecturer. His 2 thrilling collections, Misprint and On Trust, A Book of Lies, appeared in 2012 and 2017, bringing with them much praise and prize shortlistings, including being likened to John Ashbery and having Poetry London say he writes like a photojournalist in some parallel universe, which I think is wonderful. He's a translator of novels, short stories, and poems from both Russian and Spanish. His translations of Mayakovsky appeared in 2016 and were called both sharp and immaculate. Indeed, one reviewer wrote that they are the only translations of Mayakovsky that give any real sense of his brilliance. Heaven, his translations of Manuel Villas, appeared in 2020. James is also an editor at Carcanet Press, and he lectures at Cambridge University in Spanish and Russian translation and Spanish and English literature. James is a fiercely intelligent poet whose work is often wry and deadpan, but mostly when I read him, I get this enormous sense of deep time. With just a word or a phrase, he can suddenly plunge the reader into a dialogue with ancient philosophy or poetics, or indeed centuries-old concerns, only to update them, making them relevant, inspiring, and perhaps even troubling. And Homunculus certainly continues in that vein. Based on the 6th century elegies of the Roman poet Maximian, this epic poem Homunculus takes on aging, desire, perfume, Scooby-Doo, the fragility of the body and the mind, literature, the penis, and death itself. Homunculus, a book-length poem, is a riotous and compelling tour de force which refuses to give us easy answers. Instead, it is a speaking in tongues, the wildest of beasts, and an arrow pointing nowhere and yet everywhere. And we're here to celebrate it. So congratulations to James. We're going to hear some poetry from Homunculus. Hi.
Hello. Well, if you can hear me, I'm assuming that you can. It would be quite appropriate for, given what the book is like, for me to spend 30 minutes speaking into nothingness and nobody to tell me what was going on. But I'm hoping that you can. What I'm going to do is read, I've been thinking about how to read it, and as Richard in this introduction, which I don't really feel I deserve, has said, it's a long poem, and I was looking at ways of cutting it up and maybe doing bits and pieces and so on. But in the end, I've decided that the best thing to do is just read the final section of it, and I just want to say and give a little bit of a sort of reason why I would have done that. I'm just trying to find something on my, here we are, which is that this last section of Maximian's elegies, let me just say a little bit about kind of the shape of it, which is that it's traditionally been divided into 6 poems. The last one is very short, it's 12 lines long, and the first one is very long. It's sort of about over half the whole, maybe as much as 2/3. And it describes in kind of cruel and unsparing detail what happens to somebody who is growing older and not very happy about it. And I have, I don't know if this counts as praise or fair criticism, but I've had feedback from the 70-plus-year-old friends of my family who said, "Oh, that's just what it's like, kind of decay and despair and losing your capacities." And then the rest of it, so the poems 2 through 5, are memories and reminiscences of the poet's life. I mean, we can talk a little bit about who he was or whether he existed, or sort of theories about where this poem comes from, and sort of various failed love affairs, and some of them are slightly funnier than the others. And then there's this one which has been identified in some ways as kind of the end of Roman poetry. I mean, that's the historical point I should make, that Maximian's writing in about 6 AD. So the end of Western Roman poetry, when the Western Roman Empire has finally definitively collapsed, and the remnants are over there in Byzantium, and Rome is overrun by the barbarians and so on. And there's a moment in the poem, and you'll hear it when I read it, which has been it's been suggested that it's the end of the apps. You can get down to one line, which is the end of Roman poetry. And I thought that because of that, I'd read this, because we'll have some have some finality, I suppose. I mean, it's the end of the end of the end of things. So things are ending, and this is the end of their end. I'll start reading and stop babbling now. But so here we are, section 5. And yes, sorry, I should babble some more. The premise of this poem is that Maximian is sent on a diplomatic mission. I mean, we don't know whether or not this is true, but sent on a diplomatic mission and to the edge of the empire. And I deliberately don't specify which kinds of empire, because there are lots of empires that are falling to pieces at the moment. Anyway, I was sent to the edge of our failing empire on a mission that at the time seemed successful. In retrospect, all diplomacy is useless. Everything nowadays is a staving off, a delay to the inevitable collapse that we can minimize, soften a little, but will always make itself shown in death. A stupid commentary on itself world, as though someone caught in an avalanche would get out his phone and Google avalanches. I didn't realize this back then, took my job seriously, and tried to broker an acceptable deal between two parties, both of whom were liars. And as I worked on this treaty, that seemed so important then, and in memory was clearly just waste paper, I let my defenses fall and fell into similar battles for my much abused heart. She was with the delegation. Part of her first approach was clearly politics. I could riff here about how love is politics, how sex is politics, how every human meeting is at its root only politics. Not often have I seen this shown so bluntly. In retrospect, all diplomacy is useless. In retrospect, she pretended to fall for me. What really happened was I lost my head. Sorry, I can't, it stopped here. Sorry, I'm very sorry. I don't know why it stopped there. I can't move the thing. I lost my head and thought as men so often do. Sorry, I just can't see the last line of the page. And thought as men so often do that I had at 60, all the charms I'd had at 17. She was with the delegation and was assigned me as a cultural aide. Her job to show me museums, restaurants, the pleasant side of her ancient culture. We saw the holy rocks that proved, she said, her country's claim on ours. I argued with her, showed her the old cuneiform, more glyphs and wedges, our clay language that proved, I said, our country's claim on hers. Oh, let's not argue, she said with a laugh. You're here to sort all this out, aren't you? And I laughed as well and said that I would try. We saw the art of their 19th century masters, the kinds of painting you can buy in any auction, domestic scenes to purchase by the yard. I said, how nice. And she said, mock offended, how nice? This knocks your hockney into a cock-a-hoop. So we laughed a little bit about my language, and I thought how sweet her accent was. The voice of someone clever, putting thoughts into words you understand in a language not quite her own, has always won me over, blindsided me. I was like Ulysses on his boat, and this language came bouncing, the sirens speaking my own tongue. I could not avoid its power and let it bear me, overwhelmed headfirst to hidden reefs and shoals. That evening, in the hard currency restaurant, smoking hot lamb shashliks, hot sauce, the hot wine in cast clay bottles, she took my hand across the starched offensive tablecloth and looked at me and said, come on, let's dance. And I demurred, but then stood with her, jogging from foot to foot in the classical postures of pathetic, embarrassed masculinity, as the folk orchestra kicked off and she swayed to its doleful rhythms. Between the stolid pillars of the hall, she danced, lithe and slender, not so much lovely as alien. She moved slow, the pleasure she promised was secret and powerful as death. Somehow the dance floor cleared. She was there alone, dancing for me alone. I remember most clearly how her curled hair shook as she stamped her feet, fell free and bounded against her soft white neck. We ended up in my hotel room, both of us a little tipsy, both of us perhaps pretending to be a little tipsier than we were. But not just tipsy, I grew drunk, to uncover her breasts. They fitted soft to the palm of my hand. One hand covered one whole breast. Her nipples stood clear and tautened as I breathed on them. And then, demurely unclothed, she sat on the side of the bed, and the line between her thighs and the line where her thighs met, her soft little stomach. I could tell you about this, but then I'd have to kill you. All I can tell you is that it killed me. Oh, what drunkenness, what physical drunkenness to grasp her in my arms and hold her. I squeezed her so close, her bones seemed to complain, and I was just about to bring myself into her when, oh, stop, please stop, she cried out. Your arms are too strong and they hold me too tight. My legs cannot support your body. Too late to rearrange, I withdrew and splashed her knee with a watery cum like whey risen from milk or lumpy spindrift. My penis shrank in embarrassment and I was suddenly stone cold sober. In this moment of high disgrace, as she walked away like a queen to fetch some paper and dab her leg dry, I suddenly realized how much this mattered, how strongly I had decided I loved her. Yes, love, even that, after one afternoon and a wispy premature ejaculation. I knew myself caught and felt myself happy to be caught. Homunculus is a simple man, perhaps unsuited for bedroom diplomacy, and she was from an ancient culture with some sustainable claim on my own. No surprise that I should be so well enticed, that her charms and bienséance should have wrapped my brain in silk. Even King Arthur was defeated, even Merlin. So what hope could I have against such decorous treachery? From this moment I ceased to be a diplomat. I forgot about treaties and trade deals, the delicate boundaries and balances, backstops, lines on maps. I was a lover, a failed lover. That was my identity and I lived it complete. Go there, says love, and I go. Sit here, says love, and I sit. Stay, says love. Roll over, beg. A lover is from a more distinguished lineage than any diplomat. Even the gods have loved. This is a short way of saying even the gods have humiliated themselves. She walked back from the bathroom, a dead, glistening smear on her right knee. Her knees were beautiful. She sat down next to me on the bed where I lay, still in embarrassed shock, too embarrassed and shocked even to lie and murmur the traditional words, I'm sorry, this has never happened before. She looked me in the face and smiled. Poor homunculus, come here. She stretched herself beside me and I felt her long heat, breast to breast, belly to belly, the warmth of her groin against me. We kissed and rested, and I slowly forgot my shame. Our second time was successful, and the third, and, God help me, the fourth. Dawn came into the hotel room, through the orange viscose curtains, casting orange light on all our naked flesh. In such light, every shade of skin's unnatural, from presidential lobster to Benidorm paedophile. Then she rolled away from me, got up, showered, dressed, and left. I stayed in bed, happy and empty, empty and happy, my mind creating memories. The day that followed, I gave up Gibraltar. No, that's not how it was, it's how it could have been. The day was one of high professionalism. And only once, after a strenuous session when neither side would cede an inch, did I catch her eye in an ambiguous glance, a half smile, after which I was more conciliatory. I needn't talk you through the day, the meals, the unwanted entertainments. After it all, the world shrank. The two of us once more in my orange room, but this time was all failure, permanent failure. I think the previous night had broken something. I loved her, but my body refused to act, to stiffen, to ready itself. My penis lay like an ostrich chick, all weak neck and closed mouth, unable to bury its head in the ground. And now she was angry, urging me to perform like I had before, claiming the rights she had bought with her body, naughtily insistent, cajoling, mocking. Come on, time to pay your debt. But everything in vain. Both kinds of assault, the subtle and the direct. When the flesh is weak, the spirit is useless. I blushed and was disconcerted. Shame fractured my willpower, and a feedback loop of sheer terror left me afraid and paralyzed. One past failure insisted on a failed present. She reached over to me, began to stroke me and cajole, rounded her hand around my sleeping member, kissed it gently, blew on it as though from dormant embers charming a fire. But like I said, I was broken. The soft air, and even her muttered spells did nothing to cool the blood to my sex, and in the midst of all her heat I stayed cold and miserable and shivered. There's someone else. Is there someone else? Have you been working fast, tomcatting around with other women from the delegation? Are you just here to screw us all over? Cultural imperialism by your cock. Whose bed did you crawl from to come to mine? I told her she was mistaken. It was diplomacy itself kept me down. The daily worry about how to meet the world, the arguments, the threats, the papers drawn up only to be torn apart again. 1,000 aspects of my day job that froze me in my nighttime duties. She looked skeptical and thought I was lying. You can't fool me. You can't fool love. They say that love is blind, but they are lying. Justice is blind, or Stevie Wonder. Love itself has 100 eyes. Come on, bring yourself back to this bed. Stop playing the great game and come back to our little game, here and now. If it is as you say, and your senses are frozen from too much work and worry, then just lay down your problems for a moment. As soon as it's set aside, a trouble's weightless. I flung myself back on the bed, naked and hopeless, and she was at its foot, equally naked, walking from side to side of the room, a sight that should have made any man perk up, or any man's little man for that matter. And nothing happened, and I started to cry. The pathetic hot tears of a little old man who cannot get what he wants. It's not that my desire has failed, I said. It is not that. I sat next to you this evening, and when you turned your head to your neighbour, and I saw the line that runs from under your ear, down your neck, and your jawline, the sheer balanced heft of it, the delicacy, I felt so much in love, and privileged that I might later touch that neck. My heart swelled, and I felt nothing apart from love. And when you turned and spoke to me, and I said something that made you laugh, and your eyes sparked, you were truly amused. Oh, this evening I was the happiest man in either of our countries. No, my feelings are not to blame. They have not changed, grow stronger even. It's age that is the problem. Obdurate age, this tool has passed its sell-by date. I've spent my life in the service of beauty, but my weapons now are rusted. Here's my rusty helmet, my rusty lance. Do what you will, but I am done. There's nothing left after last night. Last night itself was an aberration. I am sorry for the intimacy between us. She would not believe me, and bent over one last time and whispered suggestions in my ear. Perhaps we could, would you like to? Suggestions that in earlier years would have caused me to growl like a tiger and leap on her and ravage her flesh and greet the morning sullied and joyous. But that night, nothing. The big zero. And when she saw all her effort, her invitations to her own humiliation, her nature and her arts all useless, the member in question still lay quiescent, as though this were nothing to do with him. Then she threw herself on the bed next to me, her hair untied and tangled over her sweating shoulders, and cried herself a little from frustration, then laid her head on my spongy gut, looking away from me, and spoke her regret to my cock as follows. Oh, you used to make everything better. You used to be a treasure and a joy to me. How can I lament you? What tears can I shed now that you no longer shed your tears? How can I memorialize you who made me so happy? I always used to laugh after sex, the relief of it. What kind of a monument could I raise to you now you can no longer raise yourself? How can I thank you for your service now that this will has come to nothing? A gilt carriage clock could be traditional, a card signed by everyone in the office. I loved you and your acolytes. I loved every inch of you. You took my mind off things, or put it on one thing, stayed with me through hours of pleasure and pain. You witnessed my most mysterious joys, had a front row seat at half of them, or else stood guard to see no one disturbed us, willing at any moment to be called to the fray. My whim was a trumpet call. And where are you now? Where is your vigour, the way you would strike me over and again, soft blows that made me sigh? Where is your rosy head that would dip and disappear, swallowed up, then return and dive again? Here you are, beaten down. You used to be purple. Now you're pale as milk, as limp as nothing, limp as a boiled leek. I try everything and you are insensible. I pride myself that I'm quite good at this, and even I, with all my charms, have failed. I weep for your death, oh poor pale penis. If you can't do your job, you're as good as dead. This public eulogy to my private parts made me uneasy, and I gave an awkward laugh. Woman, wow. You've got it bad. I'm sorry, but my old tool is only one of thousands. Go on, be happy. Move on to the next one. There must be plenty more pricks in the sea. So mine doesn't spark joy? Condo that fucker and move on. She spun faster than I'd seen her move before and looked at me, true fury in her eyes. Oh, you are wrong, you traitor, you foreigner. I am not sorry for myself, but for the whole collapsing world. You talk about intimacy. Intimacy's nothing. Does the fact that one drunken night some dank pearl bulged at the end of a condom give us any connection at all beyond those small, fraught, gasping minutes? This isn't you and me. It's the way it's all disappearing. If a prick doesn't work, we're done for. A symptom of how we're all, you'll excuse the expression, fucked. I came to the talks, but it wasn't a honey trap. Just an idea that a happy man won't go to war. Procreation's important. Everything's all on an edge. We need to do what we can to calm down. Sex is a kind of diplomacy, the way to draw two minds together so closely that two souls become one flesh. If there's no possibility of making love, then beauty is worthless, male as well as female. The background to our lives can't be simple, unadorned self-interest, mechanics and wheels, self-interest framed as debate, good people on both sides. With all the questions you came here to answer, there is only self-interest in the face of a greater, uncaring, guilty terror, where sex won't help you, borders won't help you, nothing will be redeemed from the general wreck. Oh, you can gather your nationalism, gather your pretty memories of fucking me, but moments you feel of being transcendent won't save you when the seas start to rise. Debate. The debate between those who think we should not burn the world and those who say we should carry on burning. The result of future burning will be a brand new salve. Debate. Debate that doesn't rise above. Sir, I'm no racist. My house slave's black. None of this is debate. I'm sick of diplomacy. When you think of all the good a prick can do and how it's always the old unchained, saber-rattling, dong-waving use it's put to, there are things to be said for living at the end of an empire, the chance of final synthesis, of having literally the last word. Though we have reached the point where even to say future generations will condemn us is to speak with unwarranted optimism. I see children at play. The last but one issue of children. beautiful, but the state of the current world ruins everything, even beauty. We are walking corpses, and this is regretful. Future aliens will try to piece together who we were really and why we fucked up so hard. I can say this too easy, the ease of words parallel to their sweetness, sticky, muddy words that I choke on even as they come with their retching fluidity, but they are my words, finally. Yes, I can have the last word, and my last word is this: grow up. Grow up and use your cock for what it's meant for, not to think with. An unthinking penis kept at work in bed will do more good than when frustrated, filling a man's brain with boiling, aggressive sperm. If your prick is limp, your thoughts go elsewhere. Everything yields to a non-metaphorical penis, even the highest, most sacred things. And again, she apostrophized me down there, one last farewell to the tool she was leaving. Oh, penis, weapons bow down before you, calmly, without groans or resentment. Sword blows are not more terrible than your anger. Wisdom herself, who would rule the world, offers her hands to you, allows you to guide her. You bring so much happiness to the world. Virginity dies with a smile on her face, slain by your wished-for stroke. You should not be like this old man's poor prick, but stand courageous and perform great tasks. Am I talking about the penis now, or about what I want the penis to mean? Art thou but a penis of the mind? You suffer, penis, principle of courage, as you make your way through storms, ambushes, traps, loss, and bitter argument. But the calm after the storm, the hero's journey ending when all the traps are past, you alone can provoke the perfect sadness, the love that speaks its name, the union built on bricks of sex that calms the tiger and the lion in their rages. Invincible penis, invincible idea of the penis, patient, conquering, desiring to be conquered, world gathering to a head, willing to defeat and be defeated. Your anger is brief, your pity is great, joy flows through you, and even without your power, your purpose, if not your use, remains. After this weird speech, a kind of last rites to my cock, she laid her head back on my arm. I didn't speak. The light had faded completely, and in the distance the noise of the city was dead. We slept a while, and when I awoke she had silently left me, leaving the scene of a crime. Nothing to remind me of her, no sign she had even existed, except a single twisted Tristram Shandy hair against the white bathroom tiles. I opened the curtain. The sky was full of stormlight. Migrating birds flew past. An arrow pointing nowhere.
I had to unmute myself to clap.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, James. It's such an epic. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I'm sure I speak for everyone. It's incredible. Okay, well, let's have a little chat.
Yeah, okay. Do you mind if I drink?
Yeah, you should.
Okay.
A little sherry. That sounds nice.
It's Madeira, but yes, here we go.
Sorry, perfect. Okay, very fitting.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I'm super interested in the speaker, the narrator, the homunculus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This kind of, I don't know, this kind of crazy voice that's, despite his complaints and aging, is so full of life. Earlier on, he writes, "I'm a cannibal on myself." And I'm really interested in that idea of the voice, which, while it's being so sort of vibrant, is also kind of undercutting itself all the time, questioning everything, kind of almost eating itself away into nothing. Where did you find this kind of extraordinary tone? Is it a fusion of Maximian and, dare I say it, Womack?
Womack-Simian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the Brad and Jennifer version of this book. I'm not sure. I think that quite a lot. I mean, there are some interesting things, or at least things that seem to me interesting to say about translation in relation to this, because I was working with the Latin, of course, but then I was also when I first got interested in it, I kind of asked around because I didn't know where you could get it in libraries and so on. And the only copy I could get was from a friend of mine who went to the library at Reading University and kind of took photos of the pages, which is a Latin edition with a really kind of over the top French translation, kind of in parallel text. And then I got a copy of an English version that came out in the mid 80s, which is very, I mean, it's good, but it's very kind of sort of faithful. And I was looking at all of them, and I did a little bit of Latin at school, and I did a little bit of French at school, and so on, but I haven't used them as languages for anything really for years. So I was looking at this, and there was lots of sort of half remembered things coming back, and I built this up out of those three versions. But equally, I found I had a sort of period of immense kind of poetic constipation for a year or so, where I found that I wasn't really writing anything, but I was just taking notes and taking notes and taking notes, and I didn't know what it was going to lead to. And I would sort of wake up in the morning and think, okay, well, that's quite funny, or that's quite a good line, and how would I get that into a poem? And then I had the great luck to be given a month's residency at the Hawthornden Castle. I mean, this is this amazing thing where people are, as a result of the bequest of people say she's eccentric, but a very sensible woman who left lots of money for writers to have time to write. And people go to this castle up in Scotland and stay there for a month and live in kind of monastic seclusion, writing and so on. And it all came out then. So I'd been thinking for a long time, and maybe this is to answer your question, because as you see, I don't really answer questions properly. But I've been thinking a lot about kind of what I would do with this poem. And then in literally, the first week I was there, I was finishing a translation, and the last week I was starting something else. So it must have been 2 weeks. I was just writing this every day, working on the translation, sort of fitting it all together. And and that's where the voice came from, this sort of very, fevered is the wrong word, because I was getting kind of room service and kind of sitting in a large soft bed and kind of wrapping myself in a dressing gown. But this very sort of intense but not very long period of time where everything that I'd been noting down and thinking and reading about this poem, actually maybe everything I'd been noting down and thinking and reading in general had come together, and then the poem served as a sort of conduit for that. And it was a translation, but I was sort of, with every line, with every word, I was kind of pulling at it and trying to fit in other things. And so maybe that's where the voice comes from, because I don't think, Max, there's an amazingly good, I'm very pleased that I didn't see it before I did this, because I think it would have stopped me dead. But there's an amazingly good recent edition of Maximian's Elegies by translated a guy whose first names I don't know, but who's Mr. Juster, goes by his initials, A. Juster, exactly. A.M. Juster we're seeing coming up there. Yeah, but I don't know what those stand for. And he's recently done an edition of this, a translation of this, which, you know, is just very faithful, very technically accurate, very, very good. And you kind of read it and you think, okay, this is sort of powerful, doleful, sad poetry. And you couldn't, if I'd had that as one of the other things that my mind was having to deal with, I probably wouldn't have written the poem, because that sort of seems to answer quite a lot of the things. But coming at it in this slightly sort of non-traditional and perhaps sort of not where you know, I was working with two languages so I don't really know very well, and you're sort of seeing the gaps between the words and so on, and you know, as a translator, I'm kind of shocked by my approach, but as a poet, I found it very, very helpful.
I'm so happy. I mean, I'm so happy you wrote it, because it kind of, your methodology is sort of championing. I can't say the word. Champions this kind of over enthusiastic sort of translation almost, because I've sort of read that you've written almost sort of 3 times the amount and length of Maximian's elegies. So the text is really swelled to incorporate your own ideas and your own poetry.
Yeah, no, and I mean, and a lot of it kind of sparks off in weird ways. So I was kind of the second, is it the second or the third section, I think, is yeah, I mean, is kind of set as a kind of mystery, I mean, sort of tale from the past of Maximian, this sort of adolescent fling that he had, of Homunculus. And you know, the idea that I was I mean, I ended up kind of setting it in Chicago because I wanted to rhyme second city with fecundity. I mean, that was I took this note. Oh, you know, Chicago, America's second city, you know, fecundity, second city. Oh, that sounds great. And then sort of the whole thing kind of spiraled off from that. So the whole, you know, none of the background is there, but it was all kind of, yeah, I mean, feeling free to do that, which is, I mean, again, I kind of reiterate, sort of terribly disrespectful, but I felt that I was having fun, so I kind of allowed myself to have fun.
I'm really interested in the kind of slippages in time as well in the poem, because sometimes we feel like we're in almost in ancient Rome. We're reading about like bears and songs and shells, and then suddenly a line later, it's batteries and it's Google searches and it's kind of Scooby-Doo. So what kind of world were you trying to create with those kind of slippages in time?
I think one of the things I really do believe, and I've come to believe this more over the past few years, because I've just been reading. I mean, it started perhaps in the terrible in Madrid. I remember, because this is actually, we've got very nice, I'm very pleased to see that we've got the best bookshop in Madrid, Desperate Literature, is on the call. So they're watching us. So I say nice things about them. But what happened was, the day that the current American president was elected, I was due to meet someone who I'd never met before, a translator called Yvette Siegert, in the bookshop in Desperate Literature. And we kind of met, and kind of everyone was, I mean, it was really, I mean, it wasn't just the expats, kind of everyone in Madrid seemed to be kind of wandering around like, what the hell's happened that day. And we went there, and I was thinking, okay, I mean, what do I do when I'm stressed? I read a book. What do I do when I'm upset? I read a book. What do I do when my life is falling to pieces? I read a book. What do I do when kind of the Western polity seems to be in a state of collapse? Oh, I'll read a book. And I was thinking, okay, you know, I just got I thought, well, I'll find something that's kind of completely unrelated. And I got down, it's rather stupidly in retrospect because it's entirely related, I got down a copy of Suetonius's book, you know, The 12 Caesars. It was translated by Robert Graves, so it was a nice sort of reading translation. And then I was reading it, and just kind of every page I was thinking, oh yeah, well, this is happening now. This is, I mean, you know, there's a guy who's, oh yeah, no, he's going to make, next thing that Donald Trump's going to do is make his horse a senator, obviously. And so over the last few years, I mean, sort of that was 2016. So over the time between that and writing the poem, I was reading quite a lot of sort of Roman history and classical literature and so on, and thinking, yeah, I mean, these people are describing things that are happening now, and there's no escaping from it. And on one level, it's comforting because we, you know, the Romans faded, but bits of them still survive, and we still kind of look at them and you think, okay, well, you know, an empire can be run into the ground by a complete arsehole and still kind of there be some fragments that survive and bits of it survive. And then also, I mean, the bit that sort of gets to me now is I think that I do feel that the situation is different, and we are kind of playing with forces that we will not be able to control, and that will damage the chances of people in 1500 years finding, you know, fragments of Womack in some archive somewhere and working on it, because the world will be very different and may not be, you know, may not have survived that long. And that is something that, as a, I mean, not actually sort of wanting to survive for posterity, because I don't really care about that. I mean, history may vindicate me, but I'll be dead and I don't care. You know, I want fame now and money. But as a parent, I mean, we've just had, I mean, we've got a 6-month-old daughter, 8-year-old son, and what sort of, I mean, you know, very kind of liberal, throw your hands up, what sort of world are we leaving for them? But the idea that, you know, the idea that you can kind of discern the final outline of what this kind of 2,000-year project, or, you know, sorry, 4,000-year project has been, and oh yeah, it's coming to an end, and that's what we've got to kind of cope with. And so yeah, I mean, that's why I think everything's kind of mashed together, because everything's very cyclical, but we end up kind of we may be coming to the end of all possible cycles, which is doesn't really help me sleep at night.
No.
Yeah. Sorry, I really harsh or mellow there, haven't I?
It's a fantastic answer. So it's a political choice. I love that. I mean, another thing that I'm really interested in the poem is the notion of shame. So I think the word shame comes up maybe 16 or 17 times in the poem, and it made me think about, there's this Eve Sedgwick thought experiment she used when she was lecturing about shame, where she got participants in the class to think about a kind of drunk old man who suddenly stumbles in on the lecture, starts screaming and urinating in the corner. And she's trying to get them to think about the double aspect of shame, how they're suddenly ashamed to be there, but also ashamed because they really identify secretly with the man urinating in the corner and shouting. And in a way, Homunculus seemed to kind of vibrate quite close to that sort of idea of shame, you know, like he brings up shame in the reader, like we feel maybe a little bit ashamed to kind of like empathize so much with him, but we can't help it, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's much more visible as well in the first section, because I mean, it's a very, in the original, as you know, as far as I've worked out the original and so on, in the original, there's a lot of kind of lamentation, but it's more, it is kind of varied, and I think the bit I read is kind of, you know, a story and so on. But the first block, the first elegy is huge and kind of unsparing and remorseless. And I think you're right that it does kind of invite us in to just kind of think, okay, you know, the curtain's being pulled back, we're being shown this, and then this, and then this, and kind of how are we going to is there any point at which we can stop? And yes, okay, I mean, it's a book of poems. You stop when you get to the end, but you're being kind of pulled in the whole time, and I think that's very much there in the originals. It's absolutely kind of unsparing. And I mean, Shane's interesting because I mean, yes, there's the two voices, isn't there? There's this sort of sorry, I mean, the thing that it reminds me of is a very sort of recondite idea. But there's a comedy duo called the Pajama Men, which is one of my kind of absolute favourites. I've seen them live in Cambridge when they came to Cambridge. It's great evening. But one of the things they do, I mean, if you look up videos, one of the things they do is they kind of have a great line in kind of little old men kind of saying, I mean, it's sort of very, I mean, he feels kind of Monty Python-y, or kind of, I mean, in that sense, that he's sort of, there's this sort of rather horrendous vivacity about him, I think, that is not, I mean, this is kind of, I suppose, self-pity raised to a sort of an amazing level, and so, pushed so far that maybe it does kind of force you to identify with it, that you can't ignore it. I hope, I mean, and also kind of by being party to the thoughts of this, I mean, they're being kind of posted in the first person. You can't run away from it, really.
Vivacity seems really key. There's a bit earlier on where Homunculus writes, "When I piss a whole teaspoonful of sad yet virulently yellow urine, I often secretly wheeze and punch the air."
Yeah.
I love that bit so much because it's like there's the wheezing of kind of growing old, of frailty, also the punching the air, the vitality.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, you take your triumphs where you can get them, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it really reminded me. There's this kind of, I remember hearing Karen Lieder talk about kind of aging and lateness and belatedness in German poetry. How actually, when people maybe should be kind of writing their last sort of elegiac and lyrical collection, actually they suddenly have this last kind of flowering of complete poetic flair and vibrancy. And your homunculus, this aging character, really carries that sort of, I don't know, anger and vivacity.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly what I was aiming at. I mean, and if that's what comes across, that's very good news. Yeah.
Nice. Let's see. I'm gonna see what's in the Q&A box. Does that sound like a sensible thing to do?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Oh, I probably should have read these before reading some of them out.
Let's do Adam's question. Adam's question's
okay,
fine.
So this is from Adam. Hi Richard, a question for James. James, you've translated this poem while you're still young and strong and beautiful. Yeah, that's good. Yep. What will you translate when you are old and falling to pieces?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I certainly don't know what I'll write when I'm old and falling to pieces, because I will see what happens when I get there, if I'm allowed to get there. As far as translation's concerned, I go through we'll see what I kind of really fall for at that time. I mean, the things I take on to translate are, I mean, I've been lucky in that the things that I've had published, or the translations I've had published, have been essentially, I mean, the ones I'm kind of, sorry, I mean, I've translated quite a lot of rubbish as well. But the stuff that I'm really proud of, I mean, the poetry, for example, has tended to be from, the fruit of things that I've kind of read and kind of become infatuated with, and then gone on to and kind of sort of really sort of dived into, and that happens rarely. I mean, I'm currently kind of falling in love with this guy, Leopoldo Maria Panero, who's a Spanish poet who is really kind of the definition of kind of a 20th century Baudelaire style cursed poet. I mean, you know, his father was kind of a famous Franco era poet, and he sort of fought against that, but then spent time in lunatic asylums and was really kind of overwhelmed by what Spanish society could do to stifle him, and then fought back step by step in these kind of amazing, very aggressive poems that I've sort of really become kind of obsessed by. So we can rephrase Adam's question. Now that I am a step closer to being old and falling to pieces, this is what I'm going to be thinking about next, and we'll see what happens there. I mean, I don't know.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The younger the verse that you translate will be.
Yeah, well, possibly. I mean, it does, it's a way to keep young, I suppose.
Chris is asking, actually, and this is it's a really good question, actually. What is a homunculus? Is it a word for an impotent old man? And that's actually really key. We hadn't defined it. So.
No, we haven't defined it. No, that's true. A homunculus, I mean, as I understand it, I'm sure kind of if I went and kind of looked in the dictionary and I'd be thought wrong, but the idea of the homunculus literally means kind of little man, I think. I mean, this sort of diminutive ending and homo, whatever, at the beginning, so a little man. And the idea was that, I mean, there was this theory back in the days when people didn't know how biology worked. There was this theory, I mean, I have at some point known something about kind of the religious basis to it. I think it's to do with the idea that souls can't be created or destroyed, so they must be always in existence. So the idea is, what you have is a spermatozoon, because you see that. I think this, I'm going to get muddled, and my friends who are watching this who know more about this than me will kind of take the piss out of me later. But basically the idea is that kind of you can't see it, but sperm contains, in the little bit at the top, a tiny little man who then kind of finds a soft bed in the lady for a while and grows up and is nurtured and then comes out. But the man is pre-existing inside the child is pre-existing inside the sperm. And so that was the name given to the homunculus, given to this figure, the homunculus. And obviously, I mean, logically, you deconstruct it very easily, because each of these tiny little men must have inside their tiny little invisible testicles or millions of other tiny little men to make the next generation along, and so on. So it becomes quite ridiculous. But homunculus, yes, I mean, that's how I understand. And there is also there are also other things to do with alchemy that I can't remember at the moment, but just that's kind of the main idea I have at the moment.
Which is great, because it makes him kind of like an almost kind of ever-present, kind of constant figure. This tiny little old man with his kind of concerns. So he's always there, whether young and microscopic or old and writing epic poetry.
Yeah.
I'll ask you one more question from the Q&A, which I love this question from Michael. Did you?
No, not Michael. Not Michael's.
Oh,
I think Michael's seems a bit overwhelming.
Okay, well, I really like that question.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, but we can talk about that later.
Okay, one more question.
What about Antony's? I like Antony's.
The first one?
Well, yeah.
Fantastic. So Antony. So
the second one isn't a question; it's more of a comment.
Okay, good. Thank you for. Okay, Antony. A great reading, and particularly love the frailty and humour, and it's so nakedly human, pretty theatrical, I'd say. were you ever tempted to use a different medium, a play? He asks, hopefully. Okay, so will it find its way into a theatre?
Well, I don't know. I mean, at the moment, theatres are having a difficult time of it, and you know, it could work as a it could work as a monologue. Lots of people are doing monologues because you can set up a video and kind of rant into the screen and send it out into the world. I think it does work theatrically. I don't think. I mean, it's very interesting because this is something I have been thinking about a lot recently, and a couple of my. This just shows kind of the obsession of actors and theatre people. But Anthony and another couple of my friends who are theatre people have said, you know, this is very theatrical. It comes across as quite dramatic, and it is something that I have thought about, but I just can't. I don't know. I mean, I think that I could, if you kind of sat me down with a typewriter and a huge sheaf of paper and put a gun to my head and said, write a novel, I could probably write a novel that wouldn't be absolutely terrible. I mean, it would be terrible, but you know, it would look like a novel. But I can't imagine ever writing a play that looked like a play. I mean, I remember kind of going through a period of obsession when I was an undergraduate with a guy called Peter Barnes, who writes these amazing kind of black comic plays, but they've got, I mean, you know, with kind of Monty Python stage effects. I mean, Monty Python keeps coming up a lot. There's this sort of scene where the foot of God comes down and squashes somebody. I mean, it's a sort of, how do you do a vision? And I was just obsessed with this and sort of how you fit things on stage. But that's the kind of play that I feel kind of drawn to writing if I would ever write a play, which I probably won't. But I mean, just kind of, I can't imagine how to get people on the stage, and I'm sure that if they end up talking to each other, if people talk to each other on a stage in a play that I write, they'll just end up kind of being one half of an argument and the other person saying, "Oh, James, you're so clever," which seems kind of, you know, you might as well stick to poetry, then you can just kind of cut out the feedback and imagine that everyone's calling you clever the whole time.
Well, you never know. So
Yeah.
hopefully Homunculus will be staged. I feel like, so we're kind of it's 8 o'clock, so I think we kind of have to start wrapping up. I mean, I'm really sad because if we'd had more time, I would have asked you about the symbol of the penis, because the whole the whole last section is this enormous sort of like pay in the penis, and
it's odd, isn't it? I mean, and this is actually, I mean, I found out from this very good edition, it's actually kind of, there's a little like a whole tradition of it. Kind of the address to the phallus is kind of an official, I mean, not very widely kind of disseminated is exactly the wrong word, but not very widely kind of widely spoken about. But there is kind of, I mean, you know, the poem to the mentula, the male member, is something that actually is, you know, there's more of them. There's more out there. I mean, you know, if I find them, I'll send them your way, I suppose.
Yeah, please, fantastic. It's been such a joy. So it's been such a joy talking to you, and I'm sorry we didn't get to ask all the questions in the Q&A, but there were some amazing questions that we didn't get to ask. So it's been so nice celebrating Homunculus. I mean, it's incredible to hear the last section, but the first 4 sections are extraordinary as well, different, full of shame, completely vivid. So please do buy a copy of Homunculus and kind of immerse yourself in this crazy kind of 6th century / 21st century world. Yeah, and Jasmine is putting the link down there, and you can use there's a discount code if you want to buy Homunculus tonight. So yeah, it's been so joyful. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I've really had fun, surprisingly, given the subject matter. But yeah.
I just want to echo thanks to you guys. Congratulations, James, and thanks for your fabulous reading. And thank you for hosting, Richard. It's been really fun. It went so quickly this hour. I do wish that we had more time and that we could learn some more about it all. But thank you so much. And thank you guys for all being here. do buy the book, use the code, check your emails tomorrow to get the code. And just the last final thing I want to say is please do join us on November the 11th. We're launching Ivan Boland's final collection with Michael, our very own Michael Schmidt, and John McAuliffe, and Jodie Allen Randolph, a well-known writer on Ivan's work and her biographer. So we've also got some special guests coming, so please do join us then. Check our website to find out about it.
That's not the book, but I'm really
it's not that book. Buy the new book, but first buy James's book. So yeah, join us next time. Check our website for details. Thank you all so much for being here, and congratulations again, James. This was really fun, and it was a pleasure to be a part of it. So I know you guys like to get your last minute messages in the chat, so I'm going to leave the event running just for a couple of minutes while you log out and get your final messages in there. But I'm going to switch us off now. So thank you all so much for being here, and it's good night from us.